When I placed 15 years of bank statements on Pastor Mitchell's desk, my wife Vanessa's face went from confident to chalk white in about 3 seconds. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Welcome to Cheating Story Exposed. Real stories, real justice, no sugarcoating. You know what? I notice many of you watching haven't hit that subscribe button yet. Here's the thing, we drop stories like this every single day. Stories about people who got played, got smart, and got even. If you want to see how these situations really end, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. My name is Nathan, and I learned that sometimes the people who smile at you on Sunday are the same ones undermining you the rest of the week. But I also learned that truth, backed by documentation, is the most powerful weapon you'll ever have. I met Vanessa 16 years ago at a church young adults group. She was beautiful, charming, and seemed to share my values about faith and family. We married after 2 years of dating, and I thought we were building a life together based on trust and partnership. I was 28 then, working as a project manager for a construction company, and she was finishing her degree in early childhood education. The early years were good, or at least I thought they were. We attended Riverside Community Church regularly, joined small groups, volunteered for events. Vanessa taught Sunday school, and I helped with the men's ministry. We looked like the perfect young Christian couple. Our church community became our social circle, our support system, our identity. But about 5 years into our marriage, I started noticing changes. Vanessa stopped working after getting her teaching certificate, citing stress and wanting to focus on preparing for future children. I supported her decision. I believed in traditional values about supporting your spouse, and my income was solid enough to carry us both. What I didn't realize was that supporting her and enabling her were two very different things. The spending started gradually. A few extra purchases here and there. New clothes, home decor items, spa days with her church friends. She'd justify it by saying she needed to maintain appearances, that as a pastor's wife-adjacent figure in our church community, presentation mattered. I wasn't a pastor, but we were deeply involved enough that the logic seemed reasonable at first. Then it escalated. Designer handbags. Expensive brunches 3 or 4 times a week. Impromptu shopping trips that resulted in hundreds of dollars at boutiques I'd never heard of. When I tried to discuss budgets, she'd become emotional, accusing me of being controlling or not trusting her. She'd cry and say that after all the sacrifices she'd made leaving her career, couldn't she have a few nice things? The guilt worked. I'd back down, work longer hours, take on freelance project management work on weekends to cover the growing credit card balances. I justified it by telling myself I was being a good husband, a good provider. The Bible talks about husbands loving their wives as Christ loved the church, and I interpreted that as giving until it hurt. But Vanessa's narrative about our marriage was different from the reality I was living. She began making comments to our friends about how I worked too much, wasn't present enough. She'd sigh dramatically when someone asked about me at church gatherings, saying I was always at the office or on my laptop. The implication was clear. I was neglecting her, choosing work over our relationship. What she never mentioned was that I was working those hours because she was spending money faster than I could earn it. I was taking on extra projects to pay for her lifestyle while she portrayed herself as a neglected wife married to a workaholic. About 3 years ago, things reached a critical point financially. We'd accumulated $43,000 in credit card debt. Our savings account, which I'd built up to nearly $25,000 before marriage, was down to $800. I sat Vanessa down with spreadsheets, bank statements, and a reality check. Her response was to cry and accuse me of humiliating her. She said I was making her feel worthless, that every marriage has debt, that I was being cruel by tracking her spending like she was a child. Then came the line that should have been my wake-up call. If you were a better provider, we wouldn't be in this situation. A better provider. I was working 60 to 70 hours a week. I'd taken on 3 freelance clients on top of my full-time job. I was bringing home approximately $9,000 a month, and it wasn't enough because she was spending $11,000. But instead of standing firm, I internalized her accusation. I worked harder. I took on a 4th freelance client. I was sleeping 4 to 5 hours a night, surviving on coffee and determination, trying to be the provider she claimed I wasn't. The irony is that during this time, Vanessa's public persona flourished. She was beloved at church. She organized women's ministry events, hosted Bible studies at our home, led the church book club. Everyone thought she was wonderful. Patient, kind, gracious. Poor Vanessa, married to Nathan who works so much he's never around. I didn't contradict the narrative. I thought that was what being a godly husband meant. Protecting your wife's reputation, taking the criticism, being strong enough to bear the burden. I thought I was loving her well by shielding her from judgment. What I didn't know was that the narrative was about to get much worse. 4 months ago, on a Wednesday evening, I came home early from a site visit that got canceled. Vanessa was on the phone in our bedroom, door closed. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but our house is small and voices carry. I heard my name, followed by words that stopped me cold in the hallway. I know, Linda, No, he just doesn't provide the way a husband should. I mean, we're barely scraping by, and when I try to talk to him about it, he just works more instead of actually being present. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake. I stood there, grocery bags in hand, frozen. She was talking to Linda Morrison, one of the church elders' wives, one of the most connected, most influential women in our congregation. And Vanessa was telling her we were barely scraping by because I didn't provide well enough. We weren't scraping by. We were in debt because of her spending, but I was still managing to keep us afloat, pay all our bills on time, and maintain our lifestyle. The lie was so blatant, so calculated, that I actually felt dizzy, but that was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I started paying attention to the way Vanessa talked about me in public. The sighs, the knowing looks exchanged with other wives, the subtle comments about how hard it was being married to someone who prioritized work over family. She never said anything directly critical, which made it more insidious. She was planting seeds, building a narrative, and I was the absent, inadequate husband in her story. Then came the Sunday that changed everything. We just finished the morning service. I was helping fold up chairs in the fellowship hall while Vanessa chatted with a group of women near the coffee station. Pastor Mitchell, our lead pastor, walked past and gave me an odd look. Not unfriendly, but searching, like he was trying to figure something out. "Nathan, do you have a minute this week to grab coffee?" he asked. "Of course, Pastor. Is everything okay? Just want to check in. How about Thursday morning?" I agreed, thinking maybe he wanted to discuss the men's retreat I was helping organize. Pastor Mitchell was in his early 50s, a thoughtful man who'd led our church for almost 12 years. I respected him deeply, trusted his judgment. Thursday morning, I met him at a coffee shop near the church. We made small talk for a few minutes before he set down his cup and leaned forward. "Nathan, I'm going to be direct because I respect you too much to dance around this. I've had some concerns brought to my attention about your marriage, specifically about how you're providing for Vanessa." My stomach dropped. "Concerns from whom? That's not important right now. What matters is that I'm hearing Vanessa is struggling financially, that you're working constantly but somehow there's never enough money, and that she feels neglected and unsupported." I sat there, coffee cooling in my hand, processing what I was hearing. My wife had gone to our pastor, or spoken to people who went to our pastor, and painted me as a failure of a husband. The betrayal cut deeper than any affair could have. "Pastor Mitchell, can I ask what specifically you've been told?" He hesitated, then continued. "That you work multiple jobs, but money is always tight. That Vanessa has to be very careful with every dollar while you seem to prioritize work over spending time with her. That she's brought up concerns about starting a family, but you've said you can't afford it. And that when she tries to discuss these issues, you shut down or get defensive." Every single point was either a complete lie or a twisted version of reality. We didn't have kids because Vanessa kept saying she wasn't ready. The money was tight because of her spending. I worked multiple jobs to cover her lifestyle, and I never shut down financial discussions. I tried desperately to have them while she cried and deflected. But sitting in that coffee shop, I realized something crucial. If I got defensive now, if I immediately contradicted everything and blamed Vanessa, I'd look exactly like the husband she'd described. The controlling, dismissive man who wouldn't take responsibility. So instead, I took a breath and said something that surprised even me. "Pastor Mitchell, I appreciate you coming to me directly instead of letting this fester. Would you be willing to look at our actual financial situation before we continue this conversation? Not to prove anything, but because I think there might be some genuine miscommunication about our circumstances." He looked surprised but nodded. "I think that would be wise. Financial issues are one of the leading causes of marital strife, and getting objective clarity could help. Can I bring documentation to your office? full transparency. Bank statements, credit card records, income statements, everything. I want you to see the complete picture. When? Is tomorrow too soon? I can take a long lunch. We scheduled it for Friday at 1 o'clock. I left that coffee shop with a clarity I hadn't had in years. Vanessa had escalated this to our spiritual leadership based on lies. She'd positioned herself as the victim of my inadequacy. And now I was going to present the truth in the most undeniable way possible, with numbers. That evening, I told Vanessa I'd had coffee with Pastor Mitchell and that he'd mentioned some concerns about our finances. I watched her face carefully. There was a flicker of something, guilt, calculation, before she rearranged her features into confusion. Oh, what kind of concerns? Just general check-in stuff about how we're managing. I told him we're doing fine. She relaxed slightly. We are doing fine. I mean, it's tight sometimes, but that's normal for everyone. I didn't push. I just nodded and changed the subject. But that night after she fell asleep, I went into my home office and began pulling documentation. I wasn't angry. That's what surprised me most. I was calm, methodical, almost detached. I pulled every bank statement for the last 3 years, every credit card statement, every pay stub from my full-time job, and every invoice from my freelance work. I created spreadsheets categorizing every expense. I highlighted patterns of spending, showing the correlation between my increased work hours and her increased purchases. I documented everything. The $43,000 in credit card debt, every dollar of which could be traced to her spending. The depleted savings account. The months where I worked 80-hour weeks and we still went further into debt because she spent more than I could earn. The boutique purchases, the spa visits, the restaurant tabs, the shopping sprees, but I also documented my income. Every dollar I'd earned, every extra project I'd taken on, every sacrifice I'd made. I showed that our household income was well above the median for our area, that we should have been comfortable, even prosperous. The narrative the numbers told was irrefutable. I was working myself to exhaustion while she spent us into debt, and then she was telling our church community that I was failing to provide for her. Friday at 1 o'clock, I walked into Pastor Mitchell's office with a leather portfolio containing 15 years of financial documentation. 3 years of intensive records, plus summary documents going back to our wedding day. He looked at the portfolio with surprise. That's quite thorough. You asked about our financial situation. I want you to have complete information. For the next 90 minutes, I walked him through everything. I wasn't emotional. I didn't editorialize. I just presented facts. Income here, expenses there. Savings depleted despite high earnings. Debt accumulated despite my increased work hours. The numbers spoke for themselves. Pastor Mitchell's expression changed as we went through the documents. From concerned counselor to shocked, then to something that looked like disappointment. Not in me. Nathan, does Vanessa know you're showing me this? I told her you'd expressed concerns about our finances and that I'd said we were managing. I didn't tell her I was bringing documentation. These numbers, they tell a very different story from what I've heard. I know you've been working multiple jobs to cover spending you didn't do. Yes, and she's been telling me that you're not providing adequately. That appears to be the case. He was quiet for a long moment, studying the spreadsheets in front of him. I need to ask you something directly. Are you being financially abusive, controlling the money, limiting her access, requiring her to justify purchases? Pastor, every account is joint. She has full access to every credit card, every bank account. The only limit on her spending is the credit limits on the cards and the balance in the accounts. Limits I've raised multiple times to accommodate her purchases. I've never questioned a single purchase until we hit a crisis point with debt, and even then, when I tried to discuss it, she accused me of being controlling and I backed down. He nodded slowly, making notes on a legal pad. I'm going to need to speak with Vanessa. I understand. But Nathan, I want to say something first. If what these documents show is accurate, and I have no reason to believe they aren't, then you've been slandered. Your reputation has been damaged based on false information. That's serious, both personally and within our church community. I know. Why didn't you defend yourself? Why let people believe you were failing as a husband? That was the question I'd been asking myself. Because defending yourself against lies about being a bad husband makes you sound like a bad husband. Because I thought protecting her reputation was part of loving her. And because I hoped if I just worked harder, earned more, it would somehow fix things and none of this would matter. That's not how marriage is supposed to work. No, it's not. But it took her going to you, taking it to this level, for me to realize that fixing it isn't my job anymore. Telling the truth is. Pastor Mitchell scheduled a meeting with Vanessa for Monday afternoon. He didn't tell her I'd been there. He simply said he wanted to discuss some concerns about our marriage and finances. She agreed, probably thinking this was her chance to reinforce the narrative she'd been building. I didn't tell her what I'd done. I went to work, came home, maintained normal routines. She had no idea the foundation of her lies was about to crumble. Monday afternoon, I got a call from Pastor Mitchell at 3:30. His voice was strained. "Nathan, can you come to the church?" "Now?" "Yes. Vanessa is here, and we need to have a conversation together." I left work immediately, my heart pounding but my mind clear. This was it. The moment of truth, literally. When I walked into Pastor Mitchell's office, Vanessa was sitting on the couch, tissues in hand, eyes red. She looked at me with an expression that was half accusation, half plea. Pastor Mitchell gestured for me to sit in the chair across from them. "Nathan, I've spent the last 2 hours discussing our marriage and finances with Vanessa. I've shown her the documentation you provided. I want to give you both a chance to discuss this with me present as a mediator." Vanessa's voice was shaky. "You went behind my back. You showed him our private financial information without telling me." I looked at her steadily. "You went behind my back and told him, and apparently others, that I wasn't providing for you, that our financial struggles were because I wasn't being a good husband. You created an entire false narrative without ever discussing it with me. I was just venting to friends." "I didn't think—" "You told our pastor, Vanessa. You told Linda Morrison, whose husband is an elder. You created an official concern about my character and my ability to be a godly husband, based on lies." Her face flushed. "They're not lies. We are struggling financially." I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and handed it to Pastor Mitchell. "That's our checking account balance as of this morning. That's our savings account, which I've rebuilt to $12,000 over the last year by working an extra freelance client. Those are the credit limits on our 3 cards and the current balances. Tell me where we're struggling." Pastor Mitchell looked at the numbers, then at Vanessa. "Vanessa, Nathan's right. These balances show financial stability. The documentation he showed me proves that the debt you accumulated was paid down through his additional income. Your spending is cataloged and shows a pattern that contradicts your claims of struggling." "So you're taking his side?" Her voice rose. "Of course you are. Men always stick together." "I'm taking the side of truth," Pastor Mitchell said firmly. "Nathan provided evidence. You provided accusations. If you have evidence that contradicts what he's shown me, I need to see it." She didn't have evidence. She had stories, feelings, impressions. She had the narrative she'd crafted where she was the neglected wife and I was the inadequate husband. But when confronted with bank statements, spending records, and income documentation, her story dissolved. The meeting lasted another hour. Vanessa cried, deflected, tried to shift the conversation to my emotional unavailability and how the money wasn't really the issue. But Pastor Mitchell, to his credit, kept bringing it back to the facts. "Vanessa, you told me Nathan wasn't providing adequately. The evidence shows he's been working multiple jobs to provide more than adequately while you spent the money. That's not a matter of interpretation. That's a factual misrepresentation." "Fine," she finally snapped. "Fine, I spent money, but he drove me to it. He was never home, never present. Shopping was the only thing that made me feel better about being married to someone who cared more about work than me." "I was working to pay for your shopping," I said quietly. "That's the part you keep missing. I took on extra work because you were spending more than my salary covered. You created the situation you're complaining about." She stared at me, and I saw the moment she realized her narrative had collapsed. There was no more sympathy, no more people taking her side. The truth was out, documented and undeniable. Pastor Mitchell suggested marriage counseling. Intensive, structured counseling with financial transparency as a requirement. Vanessa refused. She said she wasn't going to be treated like a criminal for trying to have a decent life. I suggested separation, not with anger, just with clarity. I can't rebuild trust with someone who tried to destroy my reputation to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. Pastor Mitchell looked sad but didn't argue. "I think you both need time to decide what you want from this marriage, but Vanessa, I need to be clear. The statements you made to me and to other church members about Nathan were false. That needs to be addressed." "What do you mean, addressed?" Her voice went sharp with panic. "You damaged his reputation within our church community. That damage needs to be corrected. You want me to tell everyone I lied? I want you to tell the truth. However you choose to do that is up to you, but the truth needs to be told." Vanessa left the office furious, slamming the door behind her. I stayed for a few more minutes, thanking Pastor Mitchell for his willingness to look at the evidence objectively. "Nathan, I'm sorry," he said. I should have asked for your side before having that initial conversation. I let concern override wisdom. You came to me directly instead of letting it spread further. I appreciate that. What are you going to do? Talk to a lawyer, start protecting myself legally and financially, and wait to see if Vanessa is capable of honesty. I went home to find Vanessa packing a bag. She was going to stay with her parents for a few days. We needed space. She didn't speak to me, just threw clothes into a suitcase while crying angry tears. After she left, I sat in our living room and looked at the home we'd built. The furniture she'd insisted on buying, the daycare she'd spent thousands on, the life that looked perfect from the outside. And I realized I didn't feel sad. I felt relieved. The truth was out. Finally, the fallout in our church community happened faster than I expected. Vanessa did not, as Pastor Mitchell suggested, tell the truth. Instead, she told people that I'd humiliated her by showing private financial information to the pastor, that I'd betrayed her trust, that I was trying to control her by exposing her spending. But Pastor Mitchell, God bless him, didn't let that narrative stand. In a private meeting with the elder board, he presented the same documentation I'd shown him. He explained the situation factually. Vanessa had made claims about financial struggle and inadequate provision that were contradicted by evidence. As a result, she damaged my reputation based on false information. The elders were required to address it. Not publicly, not in a way that humiliated Vanessa, but clearly. Linda Morrison's husband, Elder James, spoke with several of the women Vanessa had confided in. He explained that there had been a misunderstanding about our financial situation, that my work ethic had been unfairly characterized, and that the church leadership wanted to ensure I wasn't being judged on incomplete information. The response was mixed. Some people were sympathetic to Vanessa, feeling she'd been exposed unfairly. But many more, especially the men in the church who'd heard second-hand criticisms of my providing, reached out to me directly. Man, I had no idea you were working that hard. If my wife spent like that, I'd be working 3 jobs too. You handled that with more grace than I would have. The women's responses were more complicated. Some of Vanessa's close friends remained loyal to her, seeing my documentation as a betrayal. But others, particularly women who'd watched Vanessa's shopping habits and lavish lifestyle, admitted they'd wondered how we afforded it all. The math hadn't added up, and now it did. What surprised me most was the number of men who pulled me aside to share similar stories. Wives who spent freely then complained about financial stress. Partners who created public narratives that didn't match private reality. I wasn't alone in this experience, just maybe the first in our community to document it so thoroughly. Vanessa stayed with her parents for 3 weeks. During that time, I consulted with a divorce attorney, opened a separate bank account, and transferred my paychecks there. I left enough money in our joint account to cover household bills for 2 months, then removed my direct deposit information from that account. I also canceled the credit cards, paying off the remaining balances from my savings. When Vanessa found out, she called me screaming. "You cut me off! You're trying to control me!" "I'm protecting myself," I said calmly. "You have access to the joint account with enough money to cover your share of bills. What I earn from this point forward goes into an account you cannot access until we determine the future of our marriage. This is financial abuse. This is me not funding a lifestyle while you trash my reputation. You have a teaching degree. You're capable of earning money. You've chosen not to work for 5 years. That was a mutual decision when I thought we were partners. We're not partners anymore." She hung up on me. 2 days later, I received a text from her mother saying Vanessa wanted to come home to talk. I agreed, but I also set up a small recording device in our living room. One-party consent state. Everything was legal. When Vanessa came home, she was different, calmer but calculated. She suggested we try counseling, that we could work through this, that she'd been under a lot of stress and maybe hadn't been fair. "I'm willing to try counseling," I said, "but I need to know something first." "Why did you lie about our finances to Pastor Mitchell?" She hesitated, and I could see her calculating the right answer. "I didn't lie, I expressed how I felt. It felt like we were struggling because you were always working. But you told him we were barely scraping by financially. That's not a feeling, that's a factual statement that wasn't true. It's how it felt to me. Did you tell Linda Morrison we were struggling financially?" I might have said something like that. "Vanessa, I need you to be honest. Did you deliberately create a narrative that I wasn't providing well enough because you wanted to justify your spending, or because you were setting up for a divorce where you'd look like the victim?" Her face went cold. "I don't have to answer that. Then we don't have anything else to discuss." I filed for divorce the next week. The financial discovery process was straightforward because I had everything documented. Vanessa tried to claim she deserved spousal support because she'd given up her career for our marriage. My attorney countered with evidence that she'd chosen not to work while spending more than my income, creating debt I then paid off through additional labor. The judge was not sympathetic to her position. We'd been married 15 years, which qualified her for some support, but given her teaching degree and ability to work, combined with the evidence of spending patterns, the support was limited in duration and amount. The house, which we'd purchased using my premarital savings as the down payment, was appraised and sold. After paying off the mortgage, I received the down payment amount plus 60% of the equity. She got 40%. During the divorce proceedings, Vanessa's friends at church largely abandoned her, not because anyone forced them to, but because her behavior became increasingly erratic. She showed up drunk to a women's ministry event and caused a scene. She sent nasty text messages to several women who she felt had betrayed her by not supporting her against me. She stopped attending church entirely, claiming it was too painful to see me there, but I kept attending. I kept serving in men's ministry. I kept helping with events and being part of the community. Because I'd done nothing wrong and I wasn't going to let someone else's lies drive me away from my church home. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. I kept the furniture I cared about and let Vanessa have the rest. I moved into a smaller house closer to work, cutting my commute in half. I dropped 2 of my 4 freelance clients because I no longer needed the extra income. The change in my life was immediate and profound. I was sleeping 8 hours a night. I had energy for hobbies again. I joined a cycling group and trained for a triathlon. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during the years of working constantly to fund Vanessa's spending, and my finances stabilized dramatically. Without her spending, I was able to rebuild my savings, max out my retirement contributions, and actually start investing. Turns out when you're not covering an extra $3,000 to $4,000 a month in unnecessary expenses, a good income goes a really long way. 3 months ago, something interesting happened. I was at the church men's retreat, leading a workshop on financial stewardship and marriage. About 30 guys attended, and afterward at least a dozen came up to talk privately. They all had versions of the same story. Wives who spent beyond their means. Partners who created public narratives that didn't match private reality. Men who worked themselves into exhaustion while being told they weren't doing enough. The shame they felt admitting it because men are supposed to be providers, supposed to handle it, supposed to make it work no matter what. I realized that what happened with Vanessa wasn't just about our marriage. It was about a pattern that's more common than anyone wants to admit. Financial infidelity. Reputation destruction. The weaponization of victimhood. One man, Derek, pulled me aside after the retreat. My wife told her whole family I'm cheap because I wanted to set a budget. Her sister called me controlling. Her mother said I was trying to abuse her financially, all because I asked if we could discuss spending after she bought a $4,000 sectional without mentioning it. What did you do? I asked. Nothing. I apologized. I'm still apologizing. But after hearing your story, I'm wondering if apologizing is the right move. It's not, I said. Not if you've done nothing wrong, not if she's creating a false narrative to avoid accountability. I gave him my attorney's contact information. 2 weeks later, he called to thank me. He'd sat his wife down with their financial records, just like I had with Pastor Mitchell. She'd cried, deflected, accused him of ambushing her, but he stood firm. They're in intensive counseling now, with financial transparency as a non-negotiable condition. She's actually working part-time, contributing to the household for the first time in their marriage. I don't know if we'll make it, Derek told me, but at least now we're dealing with truth instead of whatever story she was telling herself. Last month, I ran into Vanessa at a grocery store. It was the first time I'd seen her since the divorce was finalized. She looked different, older, tired. She was with a man I didn't recognize, and from the way he was checking prices on everything they put in the cart, I'd guess he wasn't funding an unlimited shopping habit. She saw me and quickly turned down another aisle. I didn't follow. There was nothing to say. She made her choices, I made mine, and we're both living with the consequences. But I heard through mutual friends that she'd applied for teaching positions and actually gotten hired at an elementary school 2 towns over. She's working full-time now, supporting herself. Part of me hopes she learned something from everything that happened. That she understands actions have consequences, lies eventually surface, and you can't build a life on other people's labor while destroying their reputation. The other part of me doesn't really care anymore. That's the surprising thing about healing. Eventually, you stop wondering about the person who hurt you. You stop checking their social media, stop asking mutual friends for updates, stop caring whether they learned anything or changed at all. You just move forward into your own life. I'm dating again, which feels strange after 15 years with the same person. I'm careful, maybe overly so. I watch for red flags around financial responsibility, around honesty, around how women talk about their ex-partners. If someone constantly portrays themselves as the victim, if their stories never include their own accountability, I walk away. I met someone 2 months ago named Claire. She's a financial analyst, divorced, no kids. On our 3rd date, she insisted on splitting the check. On our 5th date, she mentioned she has a separate savings account her ex-husband never knew about because he'd made poor financial decisions and she'd learned to protect herself. Is that something you're going to judge me for? She asked carefully. No, I said. That's something I completely understand. We've been taking it slow, both of us carrying scar tissue from previous marriages, but there's a difference between her caution and Vanessa's deception. Claire is upfront about her boundaries, her concerns, her needs. She asks questions instead of making assumptions. She takes responsibility for her part in her divorce instead of painting herself as purely a victim. Last week, she asked about my marriage. What went wrong, how it ended, whether I was bitter. I told her the whole story, showed her some of the documentation I'd kept. You documented everything, she said, looking through the spreadsheets on my laptop. I had to. Without evidence, I was just another angry ex-husband blaming his wife for his problems. But with evidence, you were a man protecting his reputation with facts. Exactly. She closed my laptop and looked at me seriously. Nathan, I need you to know something. I would never do what she did. But I also need you to trust that if I'm ever unhappy about finances or anything else, I'll tell you directly. I won't whisper to friends. I won't build a case against you in the background. I'll come to you first. That's all I ever wanted, I said. Direct communication, honesty, partnership. Then that's what we'll build if we build anything. We're still figuring out if we're building something. But the foundation is different this time. It's based on transparency, mutual respect, and the understanding that both people have to contribute, financially, emotionally, and honestly. At church, my reputation has been fully restored. It took time, took consistency, took continuing to show up and serve even when it was uncomfortable. Pastor Mitchell has used our situation, with my permission, as a case study in marriage counseling. Not naming names, but talking about the importance of financial transparency, the danger of narrative building, and the necessity of bringing evidence instead of accusations when serious concerns arise. Several couples have come forward as a result, admitting they're dealing with similar issues. The church has started offering financial counseling alongside marriage counseling, recognizing that money problems are often symptoms of deeper dishonesty and control issues. I'm leading a men's group now focused on healthy masculinity, which includes knowing when strength means standing firm instead of accommodating. When protecting yourself isn't the same as being selfish. When documentation is protection, not paranoia. The men who attend range from their 20s to their 60s, and the stories are remarkably similar across generations. Men who work constantly but are told they don't do enough. Men who fund lifestyles they can't afford to keep partners happy. Men who are afraid to set boundaries because they'll be labeled controlling or abusive. The thing is, I told the group last week, real provision isn't just about money. It's about creating a stable, honest environment where both people contribute and both people are accountable. If you're working yourself into the ground to fund someone else's irresponsibility while they destroy your reputation, that's not provision. That's enabling. One of the younger guys, Tyler, raised his hand. But what if she needs time to find herself, to figure out her career? Isn't it our job to support that? Support, yes. Fund unlimited spending with no accountability while being blamed for working too much. No. There's a difference between investing in your partner's growth and being an ATM with no say in how the money is spent. The room went quiet. These are hard truths to hear, especially in a culture that tells men their value is in their provision, their ability to support, their willingness to sacrifice everything for family. My father worked 3 jobs, one man said. My mother never worked a day after they married. They were happy for 47 years until he died. So when my wife said she wanted to stay home, I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Provide everything, ask nothing, be grateful she chose me. Was your mother spending more than your father earned? I asked gently. No, she was frugal, careful, made every dollar stretch. That's the difference, partnership versus parasitism. Your parents were a team. What I had with Vanessa was me working and her spending and blaming me for the consequences of her choices. Understanding swept through the room. The difference isn't about traditional roles or modern equality. It's about honesty, accountability, and mutual respect. You can have a single-income household built on partnership or a dual-income household built on exploitation. The income structure isn't the problem. The character of the people involved is what matters. Also reconnected with my family in ways I couldn't during my marriage. My parents, who lived 2 states away, visited last month. My mother pulled me aside after dinner. You look different, she said. Lighter. I feel different. We never said anything during your marriage, but we were worried. You looked exhausted all the time. Vanessa was lovely to us, but something always felt off. Why didn't you say anything? Because you're our son and you're an adult. We trusted you to handle your life, but we prayed. A lot. I hugged her, grateful for parents who respected my autonomy even when they were concerned. The prayers worked. My younger brother, James, has also been a surprising source of support. He's 32, getting married next spring, and he's asked me to talk with him and his fiancée about financial planning before marriage. I don't want what happened to you to happen to us, he said. Rachel and I need to go into this with our eyes open. I met with them 2 weeks ago. We went through budgeting, shared expenses, individual spending money, savings goals, debt management. Rachel was engaged and thoughtful, asking good questions about how to handle financial disagreements. What if one of us loses our job? She asked. You adjust the budget together, I said. You make decisions as a team. What you don't do is have one person secretly spending while the other works harder to cover it. Did Vanessa know how hard you were working? James asked. She knew she didn't care, or rather she cared more about maintaining her lifestyle and her narrative than about the toll it took on me. Rachel looked uncomfortable. I make more than James right now. Does that bother you, James? Because if it does, we need to talk about it now. My brother smiled at her. It doesn't bother me at all. We're building our life together. I don't care who earns what as long as we're both contributing and being honest. That's the relationship I should have had. The one I thought I had when I married Vanessa. It took 15 years and a spectacular betrayal to learn that love without honesty isn't love. It's just a comfortable lie you tell yourself until reality forces you to see the truth. I'm 44 now. I've rebuilt my life, my reputation, my finances, and my sense of self-worth. I no longer measure my value by how much I can tolerate or how hard I can work to make someone else happy. I measure it by my integrity, my honesty, and my willingness to stand firm when standing firm is necessary. The men in my support group ask me sometimes if I'm bitter. If I regret the 15 years I spent with Vanessa, the money I spent supporting her, the reputation damage I suffered, honestly. No, I'm not bitter. I learned lessons I couldn't have learned any other way. I learned that documentation is power. That truth matters more than keeping the peace. That protecting yourself isn't the same as being selfish. That sometimes love means letting someone experience the full consequences of their choices instead of shielding them. I also learned that men need spaces to talk about these issues without shame. We're told to be providers, protectors, strong, silent types who handle everything and never complain. But when that expectation is weaponized against us, when our strength is exploited and our silence is used to build false narratives, we need to speak up. The response to my story, both within my church and in the broader community, has shown me how many men are living similar experiences. How many are working themselves into early graves while being told they're not doing enough? How many are funding lifestyles they can't afford to keep peace at home? How many are afraid that setting boundaries will make them look controlling or abusive? To those men, I say this: document everything. Not out of paranoia, but out of protection. If you're working multiple jobs while your partner spends freely and then tells people you're not providing well, you need evidence. If you're being painted as inadequate while doing everything humanly possible, you need proof. But more importantly, you need to decide what you're willing to tolerate. Because tolerating betrayal isn't strength. It's not love. It's not being a good husband or partner. It's allowing yourself to be exploited while your character is destroyed. Real strength is standing firm. Real love includes accountability. Real partnership requires honesty from both people. The Sunday after my divorce was finalized, Pastor Mitchell asked me to share my testimony during the service. Not the details of my divorce, but the lessons I'd learned about truth, documentation, and the importance of protecting your reputation with facts rather than hoping people will believe you. I stood in front of 400 people and talked about the importance of evidence when your character is questioned, about the danger of allowing false narratives to go unchallenged, about the difference between protecting someone's reputation and enabling their dishonesty. After the service, a line of people waited to talk with me. Men who needed the advice. Women who'd watched friends destroy good men with lies and wanted to know how to push back. Couples who recognized patterns in their own marriages and wanted to address them before reaching a crisis point. That's when I realized my story wasn't just about me and Vanessa. It was about a broader issue in how we handle financial infidelity, reputation destruction, and accountability in relationships. It was about giving people, especially men, permission to protect themselves without shame. 6 months post-divorce, I'm in the best financial shape of my adult life. I have 6 months of expenses in an emergency fund. I'm maxing out my retirement contributions. I'm investing regularly. I have 0 debt, and I'm doing it all on my regular salary without killing myself with extra work. Turns out when you're not funding someone else's irresponsibility, a decent income provides a really comfortable life. I'm also happier than I've been in a decade. I have time for hobbies. I sleep well. I have energy for relationships and friendships. I'm dating someone who respects transparency and practices it herself. I'm leading a men's group that's making a real difference in people's lives and marriages. None of this would have happened if I'd continued to accommodate Vanessa's lies. If I'd kept working harder, earning more, hoping it would somehow fix things. If I'd prioritized keeping the peace over telling the truth. The moment everything changed was when I decided to document reality instead of hoping people would believe me. When I brought 15 years of bank statements to Pastor Mitchell's office and said, "Here's the truth. Make your judgment based on facts, not stories." That decision gave me my life back. So to anyone reading this who's in a similar situation, document everything. Tell the truth. Protect your reputation with evidence. And understand that real love requires accountability from both people. You're not controlling for wanting transparency. You're not abusive for setting financial boundaries. You're not inadequate for refusing to work yourself to death funding someone else's lifestyle. You're just done being exploited. And that's not only okay, it's necessary. My name is Nathan. I spent 15 years working multiple jobs to fund my wife's spending while she told our church community I wasn't providing well enough. When she took her lies to our pastor, I brought documentation. The truth destroyed her narrative, cost her the community she'd built on deception, and gave me back the reputation she'd tried to take. I don't regret the marriage ending. I regret that it took so long for me to stand up for myself, but I'm standing now. And I'm helping other men learn to do the same. That's my story. That's how you let evidence speak when words are twisted against you. That's how you rebuild when someone tries to destroy your reputation with lies. And honestly, life on the other side of truth is so much better than life built on someone else's deception.